cross, because it's discrediting what people are fighting, the prejudices, the injustices. Those who are saying that they already have the freedom, they are privileged. My son, when he goes to school, he is possibly going to face a racism from his own peers because of the color of his skin. And all lives matters is true, but the Black Lives Matter is not a rhetoric. It's about justice for Black people who have been oppressed for generations and generations, centuries. So we want recognition of people that are not considered as human. And so when people come, it's a cheap shot at the fight for racial justice.
Personally, I got a little bit angry. I shouldn't do, maybe, but especially at social media when the Black Lives Matter movement was going on. I saw quite a lot of people that I knew, whether it's friends of friends or family of friends, making the comment, oh, this is getting tiring now. Why is it always Black Lives Matter? All lives should matter. And my thoughts were, you're not really getting the points. If we have to explain to you why the slogan Black Lives Matter is needed, then you really don't understand the issues. And if we have to explain it to you several times, then you really don't get the point. So
yeah, it's quite insulting actually, because of course all lives matter, but it's the point that it's the point that unless all lives matter, all lives can't matter. You know, you can't take out somebody's rights and disregard somebody's rights and say all lives matter when they don't, or when you are offended that somebody's lives might matter. When you see it as an offence, or you see it as a slight to you that Black lives should matter, that means all lives don't matter. And so it just feels like it feels like the fact that Black Lives Matter seems threatening to some people, and I think that's what's disturbing.
Yeah, it's almost like they're not even giving the whole movement a chance to explain what's meant by Black Lives Matter. They just immediately assume that it's almost not trying to put Black people on top of everybody else, but they don't understand that it's because Black people have been oppressed that they need to highlight that they matter as well, rather than putting themselves on top. It's about equality, not what's that word? Not nationalism, but like Black supremacy. It's got nothing to do with that.
Yeah, I think people tend to actually like try and flip it by saying just because you say like Black Lives Matters, like we don't really value any other lives, and that's not really the case, really, because every single life does matter. But just because people like Black people saying that Black Lives Matter doesn't mean that we're anti-white or anti-Asian or whatever you, and we're just all for Black people, really. I mean, we're just like for, how can I put it? Yeah, we're just like for everyone, really. So people tend to use the whole all lives matter argument, I mean, just to like push their own like agenda across, saying that just because we're saying that Black Lives Matter, we're like branded as racist or what have you, which is not the case, because it's just that the Black community, we're actually like tired of like what's happening. So especially what's happening in America, like Black people being killed by police. I mean, obviously those police officers, they don't represent all of the police. It's just only the select few. And it's like an entire industry or organization is being tarred and feathered with one brush, where not necessarily that not all officers are like that. It's just a small majority.
Yeah.
So.
It's a question of ignorance in some cases, and in other cases, I believe it's deliberate to dilute the message that there is inequality that is suffered by some sections of the society as a whole.
There was a time when I would gasp and say, they don't get it. But how I feel about it is that for someone to say all lives matter, it means that they're actually receiving the message, just not understanding the message at this present moment in time. And for me, and this is just my personal standpoint, if someone says all lives matter, it's a start. And we're not all going to start from the same position of consciousness. Some of us are going to start with an awokeness where we are very awoke and we understand that Black Lives Matter. Some of us are going to start from a position of all lives matter, and we will need to be educated to understand that Black lives are the ones under threat. But the fact that someone says all lives matter, it means they're starting from a good place. And that's just my particular view.
It's very frustrating, I think, but not surprising. You hear all lives matter, you're not surprised. You're like, of course, that's the default kind of thing. It's also very defensive. It's almost as if you're like, if that's your first instant reaction, it's almost like you must be seeing it as an attack upon what you identify as, when it's not. It's more, should be more of a kind of self-realization, or at least an awareness of what is going on.
It just makes me feel a bit like they're trying to disregard that Black lives do matter, and even if people don't mean it in that way, it still comes across like that.
I would say that all lives matter, but they won't matter until Black lives matter. I think if that's our aspiration, then we need to focus on making sure Black lives matter. And I actually think it's a flawed way of thinking about the issues, because it assumes that that being race neutral or colorblind makes everything equal, and it's not accepting that people have different starting points in life. You know, I was reading about this, you know, President Lyndon Johnson in the 60s said, and I quote, "You do not take a person who for years has been hobbled by chains, liberate him, bring him to the starting line of a race, and then say, you're free to compete with all the others, and still justly believe that you've been completely fair." And I think that that really sort of encapsulates what we're trying to get to the heart of here.
And that's a difficult one, because it seems to hide the issue about race issues. But at the same time, all lives does matter, and we cannot make some people feel uncomfortable. They're not, we don't consider them if issues around them. So the whole slogan, you know, Black Lives Matter and all lives matter, I don't know if there's something we could do to make it more inclusive, so it doesn't seem to be one particular group.
Yeah, so I guess all lives matter. I think, you know, it's obvious that all lives matter and all lives should be equal, but the point is that they're not, and that is the point of Black Lives Matter. And I think saying all lives matter almost then cuts off the conversation completely and kind of stops that discussion from taking place. So we're not saying that Black Lives Matter means that only Black Lives Matter. We know all lives matter, but because of racism, it means that it looks as if some people's lives matter more than others, and it's not Black people.
Well, people are entitled to their own opinion. Yes, one can say all lives matter, which in a way I agree, because we're all children made in the image of God. But in here, not all lives that are suffering, not all lives are being persecuted, not all lives are screaming for freedom, screaming for breath of fresh air. Therefore, we should start from those who are disadvantaged, those who are not receiving equal treatment, those who needed to be lifted up so that we all can operate from a level playing field. That's my understanding of it.